Ever since I ended up in a wheelchair due to an accident 2 years ago, my husband and mother-in-law's attitudes have noticeably hardened. Sorry, but could you please leave this house for a second? My husband's sudden words one night were incomprehensible. What? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. My mother and I talked it over and decided. Do you mean you want a divorce? Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about it for a long time now. You can't earn a penny. I don't need you. His words cut like a knife. I understand. Thanks for everything, and thanks for leaving me with nothing. Leaving those words behind, I got up and left. The time for them to understand those words would come later. My name is Mary Johnson. After graduating from university, I've been working at my current company for 10 years. Well then, I'll be heading out. Thanks for your hard work. Thanks for your hard work too. I closed my laptop and stood up, glancing at the clock by the window. It was now about 2 hours past overtime. An afternoon meeting had run late, and as I prepared for a conference and responded to emails, more time had passed than I expected. I left the office, took the elevator down to the first floor, and looked out through the automatic glass doors at the building entrance. The sun had already set. Checking the train schedule on my phone, I headed to the nearest station. On my way, I saw two colleagues from the same department as my husband Thomas, heading the same way. I wondered if Thomas was already home. We had stopped talking about our work at home recently, so I had no idea if Thomas was busy at work. More precisely, talking about work at home made Thomas noticeably cranky, so the topic naturally disappeared from our conversations. Swayed by the train on my way home, I gazed absent-mindedly at the scenery reflected in the window. When I was dating Thomas, we often timed our work to finish at the same time so we could go home together. But our schedules had been completely separate for the past year or two. I noticed a young couple standing near the door, perhaps college students, having a fun conversation about a movie they had seen recently. The happy scene overlapped with my memories from the past. I clenched my eyes shut to hold back the emotions welling up and shut down my field of vision. I'm home. After opening the front door, I called out while taking off my pumps and looking at the shoes lined up in the entrance. It seemed everyone else had already returned home. Behind me, the door to the living room opened, and the sound of slippers approached. Welcome home, Mary. You were late today. I'm home, mother-in-law. I'll prepare dinner right away. Oh no, you don't have to hurry. You're tired from working overtime, aren't you? No, not really. The meeting in the afternoon ran late, which is why I'm late, but it should settle down soon. I responded cheerfully. I headed to the living room with my mother-in-law, Edna. After marrying Thomas, it had always been just the two of us. However, when his father fell ill and was hospitalized, we moved into his parents' home last year and have been living as a family of 4. Welcome back, Mary. You've had a tough day, haven't you? My father-in-law greeted me warmly as I entered the living room. He was seated on the sofa, reading the newspaper. I'm back, I replied. Last year, he had suffered a sudden subarachnoid hemorrhage and underwent emergency surgery. Though his condition was critical for a time, he now lives without any issues after completing his post-hospitalization rehab. I've always appreciated his calm demeanor and friendly, easy-to-talk-to personality. Having served as the head of the finance department until his retirement, he is well-versed in financial matters and often gives me tips on managing the household budget. After preparing dinner, we gathered around the table as a family. Anna came over for lunch the other day, and I was surprised at how much her daughter Olivia has grown, Edna commented. They do say kids grow up faster when they're not yours, I responded. Anna is as beautiful as ever, and having a child really brings out her feminine side as a mother, Edna continued. I guess so, I replied. Anna is Edna's niece and Thomas's cousin. Edna often expresses disappointment that Thomas and I don't have children. She isn't too happy about me continuing to work after our marriage and frequently hints that she'd like us to have a child. Honestly, I've always had a hard time dealing with Edna, especially since we started living together. She tends to bring up the topic of having children, particularly on days when I come home late from work. You could have had a child if it had been a little earlier, Mary. I suppose it can't be helped because you're busy with work, Edna remarked. While I ambiguously nodded along, I glanced at Thomas, who was quietly eating his meal without looking at me. Thomas and I were colleagues at the same company and got married in our second year of dating. Though we were told that it would be best if I became a housewife if we had a child, we have been working together for 10 years since we got married and have yet to have a child. Both of us have longed for a child and have tried everything from herbal medicine to medical tests, but to no avail. While there is a sense of loneliness, we decided to keep living as a couple and focus on our work. However, at some point, I began to feel an invisible wall growing between Thomas and me. Even though we married out of love and promised to make each other happy, our relationship has gradually grown cold. I think it started when Thomas began to struggle at work. He didn't tell me anything directly, but I heard from a senior colleague in his department that Thomas was distressed because he couldn't achieve the same results as his peers. Thomas is naturally a gentle person, not good under pressure, and has a habit of pushing himself too hard. I knew without him saying anything that he was feeling anxious and frustrated about the situation. However, whenever I tried to offer him a listening ear, he would stubbornly refuse to share his worries with me, repeating that he was fine and telling me not to worry. Since he continued to keep his worries from me, I couldn't press him further and felt helpless that I couldn't be there for him. Even so, on our days off, we made it a point to travel together or spend a relaxing day at home, treasuring our time as a couple. When I became emotionally drained from our ongoing failures to conceive, Thomas was there silently supporting me all the way. That's why, even if I couldn't directly help solve Thomas's current problems, I intended to be by his side, creating moments of comfort and peace for him. The turning point was probably when I received a promotion at work. I was recognized for my achievements on various projects I participated in and was even one of the fastest among my peers to get promoted. "That's amazing, congratulations, Mary," Thomas had said. I can't forget the expression on his face when he congratulated me. I was so emotional that I could only manage a simple thank you. As my work became busier, the distance between Thomas and me seemed to only increase. Eventually, we spent less time together, our conversations dwindled, and around the time when my income surpassed Thomas's, we barely even made eye contact. I would watch Thomas's back as he finished his meal without uttering a word and left the table. I can't help but wonder if I hadn't been afraid of rejection back then and had tried harder to support him, could we have built a different relationship than we have now? When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the bright white light of a fluorescent bulb. After blinking a few times, I started looking around. Apparently, I was lying in a hospital bed. When I looked down at my arm, there was an IV connected, and both of my legs were wrapped in numerous layers of bandages and casts. The moment I tried to move, a pain like I'd never felt before shot through my body. Tears welled up in my eyes from the sheer pain. My body felt as heavy as lead, and it seemed impossible to move. What on earth had happened? I tried to trace back my memories until the moment I woke up. I remembered going to work at the usual time that morning, finishing up a meeting and report, and leaving work on time for the first time in a while. After leaving the office, I was headed toward the station. Then it hit me. On the way to the station, which was busier than usual due to rush hour, I remember hearing the screeching sound of sudden brakes from behind. The moment I turned around, I felt a violent shock. I realized I'd been hit by a car, and fear rushed in alongside the pain spreading through my body. What condition is my body in now? The sound of footsteps approached, and suddenly the curtain around my bed was opened. "Oh, Mrs. Johnson, you're awake. But you should not get up yet," a young female nurse called out to me in a rushed manner. "I understand you're confused, but your doctor will explain everything to you shortly. Please stay calm for now." "Okay," I replied, still trying to process everything. After saying that, the nurse left in a hurry. A few minutes later, the doctor arrived and explained the circumstances of the accident and the surgical procedures. Apparently, a truck driven by a drowsy driver had crashed into the sidewalk, and I was unfortunately there and got knocked over from behind. I had been urgently transported to this hospital immediately after the accident, and it had been about half a day since the surgery. "Excuse me, but have you contacted my family already?" I asked. "We have contacted your husband and his parents who live with you to inform them about the accident and that the surgery has been completed successfully. However, they seem to be out somewhere and can't come right away." "I see, thank you." Thomas was away on a business trip, and his parents had been on an overseas vacation since last week. From the doctor's tone, I could somewhat imagine their reaction when they received the news. Even considering they were out, it didn't seem like the response you'd expect when being told a loved one has been in an accident, at least not to the point where someone else would hesitate to relay their reaction. I laughed bitterly, imagining Thomas's reaction when he found out I was in an accident. It just didn't connect to an image of him being worried about me. From the doctor's subsequent explanation, although there were no life-threatening conditions, the damage to both of my legs was particularly severe. They said the prognosis for walking again was not promising. As I received the explanation, it felt surreal, as if it was about someone else, not my own body. Thomas visited the hospital 3 days after the accident. It was surprising to see his pained expression when he saw me, injured all over and lying in the hospital bed. "Sorry I'm late." "It's fine, don't worry about it. I'm sorry for interrupting your business trip." It had been a while since we last talked, and the atmosphere was awkward. Our conversation stalled as we both averted our eyes. Then Thomas excused himself to talk to the doctor, leaving the room. I was unable to call out to him and could only watch him leave. It's been 2.5 years since the accident. The disabilities from the accident remain in my legs, forcing me into a wheelchair-bound life. The accident happened while I was leaving work, so I was able to stay with the company for a while, but it became difficult to work as I used to, and I resigned about 6 months ago. Since resigning, I've been spending my time at home, but recently a few things have been bothering me. One is that Edna's attitude toward me has become noticeably harsher than before. "Mary, do you have a moment?" "Yes, of course. I'm about to head out, but could you fold the laundry for me? It's just folding, so you can do it even if you can't move your legs, right?" "Yes, please be careful on your way." "Well then, please get it done." Ever since I started spending my days at home, I've been on the receiving end of more and more snide comments. It seems she's unhappy with her daughter-in-law being at home all day and not working. Now, every time we meet, her requests come with a side of sarcasm. I sighed while folding the laundry. The other thing that's been on my mind is Thomas's job. According to a former colleague, Thomas seems to be losing his place at work more than ever before. Outperformed by juniors and subordinates who joined after him, he seems to be treated like an annoyance by his colleagues. He used to mostly keep to himself after coming back from work, but recently he's been taking out his frustrations on me more often. "Must be nice, Mary. You don't have to worry about workplace relationships anymore, and you can eat without having to work. I heard from Mom you've been lazing around all day doing nothing. I wish I could have that lifestyle just once." I no longer saw any trace of the kind Thomas I once knew. His words were filled with sarcasm. All I felt was sadness for the changed man he had become. "I hate to ask this, but could you please leave this house?" One night, I was at a loss to understand the meaning of the abrupt words that came from Thomas. "What? What do you mean?" "I mean just what I said. My mom and I have talked it over and decided." I turned to look at Edna, who was sitting next to Thomas. "Mary, ever since you quit your job, you haven't contributed to the living expenses nor helped around the house. You've just been staying at home all the time. To be blunt, it's a nuisance if you stay here any longer." I don't. Don't you think it's imputed to be leeching off others without making any contribution to their household?" Edna continued, a triumphant look in her eyes. Thomas was silent, avoiding eye contact. "Thomas has a tough job too. Just because you're married, he doesn't have an obligation to support you anymore." Edna's words were harsh, and I turned my eyes to Thomas, who was looking down. "Thomas, are you asking me to leave? Is this your way of saying you want a divorce?" "Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about it for a long time." "So after being together for so long, you have no feelings left for me?" "Why would there be? Of course not." Thomas began to speak as if a dam had broken. "Do you have any idea how miserable I feel every time I see your face? You must have been looking down on me, right? You must have felt superior to me every day, thinking that you were better than me." It felt as though the threads we had spun together since we met were fraying one by one. "I tolerated you because you were contributing to the household expenses, but things have changed. Now you're just a good-for-nothing who neither works nor has money," Thomas said, clenching his fists, spitting out the words as if they were blood. "I don't need you now that you can't earn money." The last thread snapped with a sound. "I understand." For the first time, Thomas looked at me. "But I have a condition. All the procedures for the divorce agreement will be carried out through a lawyer. If you agree to that, I will pack up my things and leave within the week." "Sure, that's fine," Etna said. "Isn't it, Thomas?" Thomas silently nodded. "Well then, that's how it is." Thomas jolted, looking at me. "Thank you for everything until now. And lastly, thank you for leaving me with nothing." With that, I left. A few days had passed since I left the house. When I checked the incoming call on my phone, I saw it was from Thomas. After staring at the screen for a few seconds, I picked up. Yes? Mary, I'm sorry. Could you please come back? What's this all about all of a sudden? I heard from my dad. Even after you quit your job, you've been covering our living expenses. You've been investing since you were working, haven't you? And now you're able to cover living expenses with dividend income. Yes, that's right. So what? I left the household budget to you and my dad, so I didn't know anything. I thought we were living off my income, but we were mostly living off yours, weren't we? I really regret saying such terrible things. I'm sorry. After getting married and merging our finances, I had started investing using my own income. Initially, I was encouraged to do so by my father-in-law, and I only consulted him about financial management and investments. So, what am I supposed to do if I come back? Well, my dad says with my income alone, it's impossible to maintain the same standard of living as before. Besides, I'm not confident I can continue my current job indefinitely. So, what you're saying is please come back so we can live well. You've really got some nerve. I could hear Thomas catching his breath over the phone. The reason I never said anything before is because even though my feelings have changed, I believe that somewhere you still cared about me. But you're not the Thomas I once loved anymore. That's not true. I still love you, Mary. There's no need for you to say anything more. All my feelings for you vanished the last time we talked. Sorry, but whatever happens to you guys from here on out, I just don't care. Thank you for leaving me with no trust, no memories, nothing at all. Wait, Mary. Please forgive me. I'll handle all the divorce arrangements and proceedings through my lawyer. Don't ever contact me again. After saying that, I hung up the phone and blocked any further communication. Subsequently, the divorce process proceeded quickly, and I completely severed ties with Thomas. The only person I still communicate with is my father-in-law. So, have you had any trouble living alone since you split up with Thomas? No, not particularly. So far, everything's been fine. That's good. I'm sorry for the trouble we caused you, Mary. When I heard about what happened from Thomas and my wife, I was so furious I couldn't help shouting. What's more, I shouldn't have turned a blind eye to the terrible attitude my wife and son showed you for so long. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything. No, it's okay, sir. Please don't worry about it. In fact, I'm the one who caused trouble. After I left home, troubles at the house seemed to never end. Even after my income was lost, Thomas and Edna continued to live lavishly without reducing their lifestyle, eventually resorting to pawning their belongings and even accumulating debt. Fed up with their irresponsible behavior, my father-in-law recently divorced his wife. I see this as a good opportunity to reassess my life. I can live just fine with my current lifestyle, and I also want to take on new challenges.